Jack Torrance was a man who had big dreams, but his life wasn't going well. He had lost his job as a teacher because he had become very angry. Jack knew that he needed to make things better for his family. He had a wife, Wendy, and a young son, Danny. Danny was a special child. He could see and hear things that no one else could. Jack hoped that a new job would help him start over. One day, Jack got a job offer to be the caretaker of a hotel called the Overlook Hotel. It was a big, old hotel, high in the mountains. During the winter, the hotel would be closed because of the snow, and the family would be the only people there. Jack was excited because he knew the job would pay well and give him time to write a book. Wendy wasn't sure about the job at first. She loved their home and was worried about being far away from friends and family. But Jack promised her that it would be a good chance for him to start fresh. They could spend time together, and Danny would be happy to play in the snow. So, Wendy agreed to go with Jack, and they drove to the hotel. It was a long trip, and Danny wasn't feeling very well. He had strange dreams and could sense something was wrong, but his parents didn't understand his fears. When they finally arrived at the hotel, it looked beautiful but very big. The hotel had many rooms and long hallways. It felt quiet and empty, like the hotel was waiting for something to happen. The manager of the hotel, Stuart Ullman, showed Jack around. Ullman told Jack that he would need to take care of the hotel while it was closed. Jack was excited to start his job, but he also felt a little nervous because the hotel was so big and old. Ullman warned Jack that the winter could be very lonely. There would be no other guests, and the snow might keep them stuck at the hotel for months. But Jack was sure he could handle it. He thought it would be a good chance to focus on his writing and take care of his family. After the tour, Ullman left, and Jack, Wendy, and Danny stayed alone in the hotel. The sun was setting, and the hotel looked even more mysterious in the dark. Danny still had strange feelings, but he didn't say anything to his parents. The first few days at the Overlook Hotel were peaceful. Jack spent his time cleaning the big rooms and writing in his notebook. Wendy spent time in the kitchen, cooking meals and making the hotel feel like home. Danny liked playing in the snow outside, but he still felt uneasy. He had strange feelings that something bad was going to happen. Danny had a special ability. He could see things that other people couldn't. He called it the shining. When Danny touched objects or people, he sometimes saw things that had happened before or things that might happen in the future. The hotel had a strange energy, and it seemed to make Danny's ability stronger. One day, Danny walked into a room he had never seen before. It was a big, old room with a strange smell. He felt a chill in the air, and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. As he walked through the room, he saw something terrifying: 2 dead girls. They were standing in the corner of the room, looking at him with cold, empty eyes. Danny quickly ran out of the room, feeling scared. He didn't want to tell his parents about what he had seen because he didn't know how they would react. Meanwhile, Jack was becoming more and more obsessed with his writing. He spent long hours sitting at his desk, typing away on his typewriter. But he didn't seem to be writing much. Every time Wendy asked how his writing was going, Jack would get angry and say he was fine. He didn't want to talk about it. Wendy started to feel nervous too. She noticed that Jack was acting different. He was becoming more distant and angry. Sometimes, he would stare at the walls for hours, as if he was listening to something. Wendy didn't understand what was happening to him. One evening, Jack was walking through the hotel's kitchen when he saw something strange. The kitchen door opened by itself. He thought he had seen something move, but when he checked, no one was there. It made Jack feel uneasy, but he didn't tell Wendy. He didn't want her to think he was losing his mind. Danny also started to see strange things. He had dreams about the hotel, but the dreams were not like normal dreams. In his dreams, he saw a man in a strange suit, covered in blood. Danny woke up feeling scared and told Wendy about the man he had seen in his dreams. Wendy tried to comfort him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong at the hotel. Jack was still trying to focus on his writing, but the more time he spent in the hotel, the more strange things started to happen. One night, he heard someone calling his name. It was a soft voice, like a whisper, but there was no one around. Jack turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. He felt his heart race, but he ignored the feeling and went back to his work. As the days passed, Jack's mind started to become more confused. He was not sleeping well, and the hotel's silence made it hard to think clearly. He began to feel like the hotel was controlling his thoughts. He didn't know how to stop it. The strange events at the hotel were becoming harder to ignore. As the days went on, the snow began to fall heavily. The hotel was now completely isolated. Jack, Wendy, and Danny were cut off from the world, and there was no way to leave because the roads were blocked by snow. They had no choice but to stay in the hotel. Jack was still focused on his writing, but his work was not improving. He would sit for hours at his typewriter, but the pages he wrote were filled with the same sentence over and over. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Wendy didn't understand what was happening to him. She was worried about him, but didn't know how to help. She tried talking to him, but Jack would always get angry and tell her to leave him alone. One day, Jack went into the hotel's old bar. It was a dark room with a big, wooden bar and dusty bottles of liquor. Jack had never been much of a drinker, but something about the bar called to him. When he entered, he saw a man standing behind the bar. The man was dressed in a tuxedo, and he had a warm smile. The man introduced himself as Lloyd, the bartender. Jack didn't remember seeing Lloyd before, but Lloyd seemed to know everything about him. He asked Jack if he wanted a drink. Jack felt strange, but he accepted the offer. The drink was cold and strong, and it made Jack feel good, like he could forget his worries for a while. Lloyd and Jack talked for a long time, and Jack felt like he had finally found someone who understood him. But something didn't feel right. As Jack continued to visit the bar, he started to lose track of time. He would spend hours there, talking to Lloyd, and sometimes the bar would feel like the only place where he belonged. Jack began to feel more and more angry. Wendy noticed the change in Jack. She was frightened by his behavior. He had become more distant, and she could see that something was wrong. She tried to talk to him, but Jack would shout at her. He became more violent, and Wendy began to fear for her safety and Danny's safety. She knew that something had to change, but she didn't know how to stop Jack. Meanwhile, Danny's strange abilities, the shining, were becoming stronger. He began to see more things in the hotel. One day, he was walking down a long hallway when he suddenly saw a terrible sight. A man covered in blood, holding an axe. The man was smiling, but his eyes were cold and empty. Danny ran away quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't tell his parents about what he had seen, but he felt that the hotel was growing more dangerous every day. Danny knew that he had to find a way out of the hotel, but he didn't know how to leave or what to do. He was scared, and the hotel seemed to want to keep them there forever. As the days went by, Jack became more and more obsessed with the hotel. The Overlook seemed to have a strange power over him, and he began to forget about everything else in his life. He no longer cared about his family or his writing. He was only focused on the hotel and the things it showed him. One night, Jack was walking through the hotel's long, empty hallways when he suddenly heard a loud noise. It was a strange sound, like someone was calling his name. Jack turned around, but there was no one there. The hotel seemed to be alive, and it was calling him to do something terrible. Jack could feel the anger building inside him. He wanted to hurt someone. He wanted to hurt Wendy and Danny. The hotel was whispering to him, telling him that it was the only way to stop the pain. Jack's mind was slowly breaking, and the hotel was taking control of him. Jack's mind was now completely under the hotel's control. Every time he walked through the empty halls or sat alone in a room, the hotel seemed to speak to him, calling him to do terrible things. He was no longer the man Wendy had married. He was becoming something else, something dangerous. One night, Jack stood in front of a big mirror in the hotel. He looked at his reflection, but he didn't recognize himself. His face was pale and angry, his eyes wide with madness. The hotel had changed him. It had made him forget about everything that mattered. He didn't care about his family anymore. All he wanted was to serve the hotel and follow its dark commands. Meanwhile, Wendy was becoming more and more worried about Jack. She saw how angry and distant he had become, and she knew that he was no longer the same person. She was afraid for herself and for Danny. The hotel seemed to be changing Jack, turning him into someone she didn't recognize. She knew she had to protect Danny, no matter what. Danny's shining abilities grew stronger, and he began to see even more terrifying visions. One night, he saw a vision of his father, holding an axe and smiling with a crazed look in his eyes. Danny was scared, but he knew what he had to do. He had to find a way to escape the hotel. Danny didn't tell his mother everything he saw. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was. But deep down, he knew that the hotel was trying to destroy them all. The hotel was like a living, breathing thing, and it wanted to keep them there forever. Jack, now fully under the hotel's control, took a knife and went after Wendy and Danny. He had become violent, and he didn't care about anything except following the hotel's commands. He thought the hotel would give him power and make him strong, but all it had done was take away his humanity. Wendy was terrified, but she knew she had to protect Danny. She ran through the hotel's long hallways, trying to find a way out. Jack chased her, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Wendy was scared, but she was also strong. She wouldn't let Jack hurt Danny. Danny had a plan. Using his shining, he reached out to a man named Dick Halloran. Dick was a chef who had worked at the hotel many years ago. He was a kind man who had the shining too, and when he saw Danny's warning, he rushed back to the hotel to help. Dick arrived at the hotel, but he was too late. Jack, in a fit of madness, had already locked Wendy and Danny inside a big room. Wendy fought back, but Jack was too strong. It was clear now that Jack was completely lost to the hotel's power. As Wendy and Danny hid in the room, Dick tried to help, but Jack killed him before he could reach them. The hotel was in control, and there was no way out. Wendy was now trapped in the hotel with Jack. She had nowhere to run, and she didn't know what to do. But she wouldn't give up. She had to protect Danny. She knew the only way to escape was to stop Jack once and for all. Wendy and Danny were now trapped in the hotel with Jack, who had become a completely different person. His mind was gone, replaced by the dark power of the Overlook Hotel. Jack was not the loving father and husband he had once been. He was a crazed man, driven by anger and the hotel's influence. Wendy knew that if she didn't stop Jack, he would kill them both. She couldn't let that happen. Danny's life was the most important thing in the world to her, and she would do anything to protect him. Wendy had to think fast. She was terrified, but she kept her calm. She had to find a way to stop Jack, even though he was stronger and more dangerous than ever. She knew that she couldn't fight him with strength alone. The only way to survive was to outsmart him. Meanwhile, Danny was doing everything he could to warn his mother. Using his shining, he could see the danger before it happened. He knew that Jack was coming, and he tried to guide Wendy to safety. He told her where to hide, what to do, and how to escape. Danny's shining abilities were the only thing that gave them hope. As Jack moved through the hotel, carrying the axe he had found, he became more and more consumed by the hotel's power. The Overlook was feeding on his anger, turning him into a monster. Jack thought he could control the hotel, but in the end, it was the hotel that controlled him. Wendy and Danny took cover in a big storeroom, locking the door behind them. They knew that Jack would find them soon. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the halls as he searched for them, his axe ready. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The door to the storeroom splintered as Jack smashed through it with the axe. Wendy screamed in fear, but she quickly grabbed a heavy knife from a nearby shelf. She was ready to fight back. But before she could do anything, there was a loud noise. A roar echoed through the hotel, and the walls seemed to shake. It was as if the hotel itself was coming alive. Wendy turned around, and to her surprise, she saw that the hotel was starting to change. The walls twisted, and the hotel seemed to grow darker and more dangerous. Danny had one last vision. He saw the hotel's power fading, and he knew that the only way to stop the madness was to destroy the hotel. Danny could feel the coldness and the darkness in the hotel, but he knew it was all connected to Jack. If Jack was stopped, the hotel's power would weaken. Danny used his shining to reach out and warn Wendy. He told her to run, but Wendy wasn't sure what to do. The hotel seemed to want her to stay, to make her feel trapped. But she knew the only way to survive was to fight back. Jack was almost on them now. Wendy could hear his breathing and the sound of the axe swinging through the air. She knew that this was the moment. She had to stop Jack, and she had to do it now. With one last burst of strength, Wendy lunged at Jack. She slashed at his arm with the knife, causing him to drop the axe. Jack screamed in pain, but Wendy didn't stop. She pushed him away and ran, grabbing Danny's hand as they raced through the hotel's long hallways. The hotel seemed to fight against them, trying to keep them inside. But Wendy and Danny were determined to escape. They reached the main entrance, and with a final push, Wendy broke through the doors. They were free. Jack stood in the doorway, watching them leave. His eyes were wild with rage, but he could not follow them. The hotel had taken everything from him. It had used him, and now it was finished with him. As Wendy and Danny ran into the snow, they could hear the hotel behind them, but it seemed to be fading. The snow was falling harder now, but the storm didn't matter. They were free. They had escaped the Overlook Hotel, and they would never go back.